They say weddings bring families together. Mine chose to tear me apart. My name is Ellis Monroe, and at my sister's wedding, under the glittering chandeliers of a five-star Atlanta hotel, surrounded by 300 of the city's most powerful people, I was publicly mocked by my own mother and sister. They didn't whisper behind closed doors. They stood at the head table, microphone in hand, and made a toast to my failures. I stood frozen in the center of the ballroom, my 9-year-old son Jude clinging to my hand, his fingers trembling. The champagne flute in my other hand rattled against the glass. I could barely breathe. Laughter rippled across the room as my sister Sierra, dressed like royalty in a custom Vera Wang gown, leaned into the mic and said, "Let's raise a glass to my sister Ellis, living proof that one bad choice can derail an entire life." Someone laughed, someone else gasped, but no one stopped her. And my mother? Celeste Monroe stood right beside her, beaming with pride, as if she were watching her prized daughter deliver a wedding toast of the century. Then she added, "Well, at least she showed up dressed decently this time." That was the moment something inside me cracked, not from shame, but from clarity, because while the world saw me as the single mother, the family embarrassment, the silent shadow of Sierra's perfection, I had a truth no one in that ballroom knew. And before the night ended, the man she was about to marry would expose it, publicly, for everyone to hear. I didn't know it yet, but this night would be the beginning of everything I never thought I could have. I used to think I could handle anything as long as I kept my head down, worked hard, and stayed quiet. But standing there in that ballroom, with Jude's small hand clutching mine and heat rushing to my face, I realized, some humiliations don't just sting, they scar. 3 hours earlier, I'd been in Sierra's bridal suite, pinning the last inch of her cathedral-length veil, while she complained about the wrong shade of roses. "You're lucky you never had a real wedding, Ellis. All this planning is exhausting." She didn't even look at me when she said it. I bit my tongue, kept pinning. I'd worn the ruby earrings Grandma left me, the only thing she ever gave me directly before she passed. Deep red, understated, meaningful. But Sierra's eyes locked on them in the mirror, and she scoffed. "Ellis, couldn't you have picked something less? Thrift store?" Before I could respond, Celeste swept in, reeking of Chanel and disapproval. Her gaze skimmed my dress, navy off the rack, bought during a lunch break after 2 months of saving. "Let's just hope the photographer crops you out of the group photos," she murmured, loud enough for the makeup artist to smirk. Still, I fixed a torn sash for the flower girl. I found a solution when the florist messed up the centerpiece order. I rewrote all the wedding programs by hand when we discovered the printed ones said Sierra and Daniel's biggest day. I even calmed the crying ring bearer by telling him a story about brave knights who fought dragons without ever shouting. That's what I do. Quietly fix problems no one else notices. And yet, there I was, standing in a room filled with crystal, pearls, and pointed judgment, being served up like a cautionary tale during a toast. I started to reach for my purse. Jude looked up at me with his big brown eyes, confused and scared. I didn't want him to remember this. I didn't want this moment burned into his memory like so many others already were. But before I could take a single step, I felt a hand like steel grip my forearm. Celeste was beside me, nails digging in just enough to leave marks. "Don't you dare make a scene," she hissed through her teeth, still smiling at the crowd. Up at the front, Sierra kept talking. "We all make choices in life. Some of us choose successful husbands and lakefront houses. Others—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Her eyes flicked to Jude, who ducked behind me as if her gaze could turn to fire. And the worst part? People laughed. Not all, but enough. Laughed like my life was just another part of the entertainment package, like it came with the wine and steak and imported wedding favors. I felt my body stiffen. I could either flee or fold, or maybe do neither. A chair scraped suddenly across the marble. A voice said, "I think that's enough." And everything changed. The voice didn't shout, but it cut through the ballroom like a blade. "I think that's enough." Every eye turned. The sound system went silent, and the room felt suspended in a breathless pause. Elias Mercer, My sister's brand new husband, the man she'd met barely a year ago and boasted about endlessly, was standing, calm, controlled, and holding the microphone she'd been clutching all night like a trophy. He gently took it from her hand. Sierra blinked up at him, confused, drunk. Her diamond earrings swung wildly as she stumbled a step. "That's impossible," she snapped, slurring. "You've never even met her before last Christmas." Elias didn't flinch. "No," he said quietly. "I met Ellis long before you introduced us at that Christmas party, 9 years ago, to be exact." My breath hitched. "What?" Sierra's expression morphed from smug to stricken. "What is this?" she demanded, but Elias turned from her, scanning the crowd until his eyes landed on me. "She won't remember me," he said into the mic. "But I remember her. Memorial Hospital's oncology ward, room 412, Saturday mornings." The air shifted. Guests who'd been laughing seconds ago leaned in. My knees felt like they might buckle. "Back then," he continued, "Ellis was a single mom, working 3 jobs, volunteering on weekends at the hospital. Not for credit, not for a resume. Because they had free childcare during shifts, and because she cared. My little sister, Jules, was in that room, fighting stage 4 lymphoma." His voice didn't crack, but something in it made my eyes sting. "I used to stand in the hallway," he said, "just outside the door, watching." And now the memory flooded back. Jude toddling down sterile halls with crayon drawings, a frail redhead in bed smiling through tubes and exhaustion. Jules. She read him stories, Elias said, and he brought her pictures of rocket ships and purple trees. When Jules was too tired to lift a spoon, Ellis brought soup in old Tupperware and stayed to read her poetry. Jules said Saturdays were the only time she forgot she was dying. Sierra barked a laugh. "This is insane." Elias didn't look at her. Ellis never knew Jules was my sister, never asked for anything. She returned the containers every week, washed and full. She was exhausted, barely hanging on, but she still showed up. For a stranger. I covered my mouth. Jude leaned against my hip, whispering, "That was Miss Jules. I remember her." Elias kept going, voice steady. "Jules lived 3 months longer than expected, and in her final week, she told me something that never left me. She said, 'There's a woman who comes here with a little boy. I don't know her name, but when they're here, I feel human again.'" Around the room, you could hear hearts cracking open. "My family never knew this story," Elias said, "because I didn't know her name either, until last Christmas, when Sierra introduced me to Ellis Monroe, and my stomach dropped because I'd seen those eyes before, over a hospital bed, lit by fluorescence." He stepped forward then, gaze sweeping the room. "I cannot, will not, marry into a family that treats its most courageous member like a disgrace." Gasps. Ellis raised her son alone. She studied for her CPA after midnight, got promoted 3 times. She built a life with no help from anyone in this room. And when she walked into this wedding, she did so knowing full well she'd be mocked, again, and still came to support her sister. Sierra screeched something incoherent and lunged for the mic, but Elias sidestepped, offering it to no one. His lapel flower was gone. I didn't even see him place it down. My spine locked upright. My heart thundered, not with shame this time, but with something startlingly close to relief. Celeste stepped forward, furious. "Do you know how much this wedding cost?" Elias's answer was firm. "No amount of money excuses cruelty to a mother and her child." He walked toward me, slowly, deliberately. People parted like water. Jude's hand tightened in mine. "Is he coming with us?" Tears blurred my vision. "If you want him to." Jude nodded. "He's nice. He remembers Miss Jules." The guests stared as Elias reached us, standing shoulder to shoulder with me, like we'd rehearsed this moment all our lives. And in that instant, I realized something no toast, no insult, no amount of shame could take from me. I had been seen, not pitied, not tolerated, seen. Life doesn't change in one moment. It changes in the thousands of tiny decisions you make after it. The morning after the wedding, I stood at my kitchen sink watching the sun filter through dusty blinds, hands wrapped around a chipped mug. Jude was on the couch, curled beneath a blanket, his cartoons turned low. Neither of us said much. Then the voicemail started. People I hadn't spoken to in years left rambling messages, some apologetic, some opportunistic, most confused. But one caught my attention. "Ellis," my boss, Mr. Harrington, said, "I saw the video. I didn't know. We need to talk. Call me." By Monday, I had a new office. A real one. With a door, a window, and a nameplate. Clients who'd never bothered to learn my name now requested me by it. I didn't have to beg for meetings or justify my rates anymore. Later that week, Elias sent a box to the firm. No card, no explanation. Inside was a dark leather briefcase, polished, structured, professional. Tucked into the interior pocket was a sticky note with 5 words. No pressure, just admiration. E. I sat there in my new chair, staring at the note, unsure whether to laugh or cry. It was the first thing I brought home from the office. Jude noticed the shift before I did. He stood straighter. He started volunteering answers at school instead of hiding in the back. His therapist said he was processing boundaries better. I knew exactly what that meant. One night, after dinner, he looked up from his homework. "We don't have to go to Grandma's anymore, right?" "No, baby," I said. "Not unless you want to." He didn't. Weeks passed. Elias didn't push. He appeared when it mattered, dropping off grant forms for small business loans, asking about office paint colors, reading over my first draft of a business plan with quiet encouragement. No grand gestures, just presence, just consistency. The day I filed the paperwork for Monroe Financial Solutions, Elias showed up with cupcakes and a copy of Harvard Business Review turned to an article titled, "The Quiet Rise of Women-Led Firms." He'd highlighted my favorite line, "Women don't wait to be chosen, they choose themselves." That night, I placed my framed CPA certificate on the wall in my new home office. For the first time, I wasn't hiding it in a drawer. One Friday afternoon, there was a knock at the door. Sierra stood there, mascara streaked, shoulders hunched. The diamond studs in her ears, the ones Celeste had inherited, caught the sun like small flames. "You have to understand," she began. "You've ruined everything." I said nothing. "Mom's off the charity board. Dad's business partners are nervous. People keep asking questions. They think something's wrong with us." "There is," I said, holding her gaze, "but I'm not the problem." Tears welled in her eyes, and for a second, she looked like the little girl I used to share secrets with. "Can't we just go back?" "To what?" She didn't answer. Then she saw Jude sitting on the couch with his science book and moved as if to approach him. "Come give Auntie a hug." Jude stood up, his voice calm but certain. "No, thank you." Sierra froze. Behind me, Elias appeared in the hallway. He didn't say a word, just folded his arms and waited. I turned to her. "He's learning boundaries. I'd recommend you start too." For the first time in my life, I didn't feel cornered. I didn't feel like the poor relation or the stain on the family's legacy. I felt like someone who finally knew her worth. After Sierra left, Elias walked into the kitchen and began unloading groceries like it was any normal Tuesday. "You okay?" he asked. "I think so," I said. Jude wandered in. "Are we having taco night?" "We are," I smiled. Elias handed Jude a bag of shredded cheese and whispered, "Executive assistant duties." Jude laughed. And just like that, normalcy returned. Not the kind Celeste curated for photo ops, but the kind built on small truths and bigger trust. Later that night, Elias and I sat in the living room as Jude fell asleep under a blanket, his drawings scattered across the floor. One of them showed 3 stick figures, a woman, a man, and a boy standing under a bright yellow sun. All smiling, all whole. Elias looked at the drawing, then at me. "You think he's ready?" he asked. "For what?" "To have a dad who sticks around." My chest ached in the best way. "He already does," I whispered. 6 months after the wedding, I hosted my first real Christmas dinner. There were no glittering chandeliers or catered appetizers. Just the people who mattered, our people. Jude ran through the apartment in his too-big holiday sweater, helping Mrs. Rivera fold napkins, while Elias and I took a roast out of the oven. Our tree leaned slightly to one side, but Jude had decorated every inch of it with handmade ornaments and glittery glue. I'd placed a silver-framed photo of Jewel on the mantel. Her soft smile looked out over the room like a silent blessing. After dinner, Elias pulled me aside and handed me a velvet box. "This belonged to Jules," he said. "She made me promise. If I ever found someone who reminded me of how she felt on Saturdays in that hospital room, I'd give this to her." I opened it with shaking hands. A delicate emerald ring, sized perfectly. Before I could speak, Jude walked over and handed me a folded piece of paper. In crooked crayon letters, it read, "Will you let Elias be my dad for real?" Tears spilled. I pulled them both close. Later, I framed the adoption papers. Jude Monroe Mercer. I hung it next to my business license and my CPA certification in my new office. Each one a testament to the life I'd built. Not inherited, not begged for, but built from nothing. Monroe Financial Solutions was thriving. We hired a second accountant and then a third. I gave Melissa a raise and a bigger desk. My office walls now held more than framed credentials. They held meaning. Jude's school drawing, 3 stick figures under a rainbow, said it best. Me, Mom, Dad. One sunny afternoon in March, Melissa buzzed my intercom. "Your mother's here, with a pastor." I took a breath. "Send them in." Celeste walked in wearing a tailored suit and a strained smile. Pastor Williams followed, clutching his Bible like armor. She sat across from me and launched into what I can only assume was rehearsed. "I've been attending reconciliation ministry," she said. "The Lord teaches forgiveness. Family is sacred." I poured tea. "Do you remember when you told me my clearance rack dress made the Monroes look cheap? Or when you asked me to say Jude was my nephew for that gala photo?" Pastor Williams cleared his throat, shifting awkwardly. "Your mother wants to heal." I nodded. "Good. But I have terms." Celeste blinked. "Terms?" "Family therapy, not church counseling, real therapy, specific acknowledgments, not vague apologies, and absolute respect for any boundary I set around my son." Celeste hesitated, then nodded slowly. "If that's what it takes." "And one more thing," I said, gesturing around the room. "This office may not have marble floors or a view of the skyline, but it's mine. I built it from scratch. You don't get to look around and decide if it's worthy." Something in her posture wilted. "You're not who you used to be." "No," I said calmly. "But I was always someone worth loving. You just never saw it." That night, I watched Elias help Jude with his science fair display on resilience. Jude had included a graph titled, "Things My Family Helped Me With," and under the biggest bar was one word, believing. Elias caught me staring and smiled. "We're doing okay, huh?" "We're doing more than okay," I whispered. He raised a glass to me, and I raised one back. Outside, the wind rustled faintly through the trees. Inside, warmth bloomed. We hadn't just survived. We'd rewritten the meaning of family. A shaft of morning light slips through the curtains of my office, casting a soft glow on the brass nameplate that reads, "Ellis Monroe, Founder." My coffee steams quietly beside a framed photo of Jude, mid-laugh, arms wrapped around Elias at last summer's beach trip. The sound of the door swinging open breaks the calm. "Mom!" Jude calls out, holding up a flyer. "Mrs. Jensen says I should enter my essay in the district contest. It's about family." "What did you write?" I ask, smiling. He shrugs. "That real family doesn't make you earn love like it's a prize. They just love you." My heart tightens in that quiet, steady way I've come to recognize as pride. We've come far, Jude and I, from whispered humiliation in grand ballrooms to this moment, peaceful, grounded, ours. Elias enters with takeout containers and a grin. "Lunch delivery. Also, you have a voicemail from Pastor Williams." I raise an eyebrow. "He said your mother asked him to send her therapy journal entries." "She's going." I nod but say nothing. Some doors don't close. Some don't reopen. They stay cracked just enough to remind you what healing costs and what boundaries protect. As Jude settles at the side desk, Elias leans in and kisses my temple. "You ready for the board meeting?" I glance at my calendar, then at the two of them. I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. Outside, the wind rustles leaves. Inside, our story continues, not in grand gestures or dramatic speeches, but in the quiet choice to love, to grow, and to never again apologize for surviving. Because the happiest endings don't come from the families we're born into. They come from the ones we build,